John F. Kennedy, JFK, Jack. These names conjure images of a bygone era, a time of glamour, hope, and youthful optimism that permeated American life. Kennedy, with his movie star looks and effortless charm, embodied this era like no other. He wasn't just a president, he was a symbol of American aspiration. His presidency, often romanticized as the Camelot Years, continues to fascinate us. Was it a brief shining moment, a golden age tragically cut short, or is this perception colored by nostalgia? His speeches still resonate with their call to service and belief in the power of ideas. But beyond the charm and rhetoric, how impactful was John F. Kennedy's presidency? These are the questions we'll be exploring today. Welcome to Enchanting Lore, where we delve into the captivating stories of history. On November 22, 1963, the world watched in disbelief as the news unfolded. President John F. Kennedy, riding in a motorcade in Dallas, Texas, had been shot. The young president, full of life and promise, was gone. The assassination sent shockwaves through the nation and the world. Kennedy's presidency, cut tragically short, lasted a mere 1,036 days. In that short time, he faced immense challenges: the Cold War, the growing civil rights movement, and the looming threat of nuclear war. This leaves us with a question that continues to be debated. What if Kennedy had lived? What would his legacy have been? The passage of time has done little to diminish the fascination with John F. Kennedy. His life, presidency, and tragic death continue to be the subject of countless books, documentaries, and conspiracy theories. Was he the visionary leader who inspired a generation, or a flawed politician whose charisma masked a more complex reality? To truly understand JFK's legacy, we must delve beyond the mythology and examine the historical record. We must analyze his policies, his successes, and his failures. So join us as we embark on a journey through the Kennedy presidency to explore his enduring legacy. Let's talk about JFK's domestic agenda, the new frontier. It wasn't just about putting astronauts in space. Kennedy aimed to tackle serious issues at home. He proposed tax cuts to stimulate growth and poured funds into education and job training programs. But Kennedy faced a Congress hesitant to open the national purse strings. This constant battle with Congress became a recurring theme throughout his presidency. Yet Kennedy remained undeterred, believing in the potential of America and its people. Did Kennedy's economic policies actually work? The economy did start to improve under his watch, but was it because of his policies or other factors? Kennedy understood the power of perception, projecting an image of optimism and prosperity. When people feel confident, they spend, invest, and take risks, boosting the economy. But let's not forget, the early 1960s was a complex time. The Cold War cast a long shadow, and the threat of nuclear annihilation hung over everything. Kennedy's economic legacy remains a topic of debate among economists. Let's talk about an issue that defined Kennedy's presidency: civil rights. The early 60s saw the civil rights movement gain momentum, with activists like Martin Luther King Jr. leading the charge. Kennedy, though initially cautious, couldn't ignore the moral firestorm engulfing the nation. In June 1963, he delivered a landmark address on civil rights, calling it a moral issue as old as the scriptures and as clear as the American Constitution. Kennedy proposed sweeping civil rights legislation to outlaw discrimination. It was a bold move, facing fierce opposition, but it defined his legacy. Beyond the economy and civil rights, Kennedy championed social programs. He saw education, healthcare, and social welfare as investments in human potential. He expanded the space program and created the Peace Corps, encouraging young Americans to serve their country. Kennedy understood that government could be a force for good, uplifting the lives of everyday Americans. He believed in a compassionate and effective government. His vision was to create a more just and equitable society. Let's talk about JFK on the world stage during the Cold War. Kennedy, young and charismatic, represented a new generation of leadership. He understood the delicate balance of power between the superpowers. Kennedy wasn't afraid to stand up to the Soviets, seeing the struggle against communism as a battle for hearts and minds. He believed in diplomacy, but also understood the need for a strong military. He increased defense spending and created the Green Berets, ensuring America was ready for any challenge. Kennedy's foreign policy was marked by both triumphs and failures. One of the first major foreign policy challenges Kennedy faced was the situation in Cuba. The Bay of Pigs invasion, a plan to overthrow Castro, turned out to be a disaster. The exiles were poorly trained, and Castro's forces were ready and waiting. The invasion was crushed, and Kennedy was left to deal with the fallout. The Bay of Pigs was a major embarrassment for Kennedy and the United States. It made America look weak, and emboldened Castro and his Soviet backers. The Bay of Pigs was just a prelude to the Cuban Missile Crisis. In October 1962, American spy planes discovered Soviet nuclear missile sites in Cuba. For 13 agonizing days, the world held its breath. Kennedy assembled a group of advisors known as XCOM to navigate the crisis. He resisted calls for a preemptive strike, choosing a naval blockade of Cuba instead. He informed the American people about the crisis and demanded the Soviets remove the missiles. It was a tense standoff, a game of chicken with the fate of the world hanging in the balance. And then, just when it seemed like the world was about to go up in flames, Khrushchev blinked. The Soviets agreed to remove the missiles from Cuba, and the United States secretly agreed to remove its own missiles from Turkey. The crisis was averted, and the world breathed a collective sigh of relief. The Cuban Missile Crisis was a defining moment for Kennedy and the Cold War. It led to a thaw in relations between the superpowers and the signing of the Limited Test Ban Treaty in 1963. JFK's foreign policy legacy is marked by both triumphs and failures. He learned from his mistakes and helped steer the world away from nuclear war. Let's blast off into one of the most captivating chapters of JFK's presidency, the space race. Kennedy saw space exploration as a symbol of American ingenuity and spirit. The Soviets had launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite, into orbit, alarming Americans. Kennedy recognized the need to catch up and reclaim America's position as a global leader in science and technology. He knew that space exploration could inspire a new generation of scientists and engineers. Kennedy tapped into that sense of wonder and adventure that lies at the heart of the human spirit. The launch of Sputnik in 1957 sent shockwaves through the American psyche. The Soviets had stolen a march on America in science and technology. The implications were unsettling, raising concerns about national security. The space race was about more than just national pride. It was about national security. Kennedy poured resources into the space program and challenged NASA to land a man on the moon before the decade was out. It was a high-stakes competition between two superpowers, a test of each nation's technological might and political will. We choose to go to the moon, a bold promise. On May 25, 1961, Kennedy delivered a historic speech to Congress. He laid out his vision for America's space program, inspiring generations to come. I believe that this nation should commit itself to landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth, Kennedy declared. No single space project will be more impressive or important for exploration. Kennedy's words were bold, even audacious. Landing a man on the moon was a technological feat of unprecedented complexity, but Kennedy understood the power of a dream to unite and inspire. The Vietnam quagmire, a growing commitment. One of the most contentious issues of Kennedy's presidency was his handling of the Vietnam War. Kennedy inherited a conflict of Cold War tensions, colonial legacies, and internal Vietnamese struggles. After the French withdrew in 1954, Vietnam was divided, communist North, non-communist South. Kennedy increased American military aid to South Vietnam, sending advisors to train their army. He feared a communist victory would trigger a domino effect in Southeast Asia. But the situation was more complex than just communism versus democracy. The South Vietnamese government struggled with corruption and instability. Kennedy faced pressure to escalate involvement while recognizing the dangers of a prolonged conflict. Covert operations: a legacy of shadows. Another controversial aspect of Kennedy's presidency was his administration's use of covert operations, those clandestine activities carried out by intelligence agencies like the CIA, often operating outside the bounds of international law. Now, covert operations were nothing new during the Cold War. Both the United States and the Soviet Union engaged in espionage, sabotage, and covert actions to undermine each other's influence around the world. It was a shadowy game of chess played out in the shadows, with lives often hanging in the balance. Kennedy, mindful of the potential for blowback, was initially cautious about authorizing covert operations. However, he also recognized their potential effectiveness in achieving certain foreign policy objectives, particularly in countering Soviet influence in strategically important regions. One of the most well-known covert operations during Kennedy's presidency was the plot to assassinate Fidel Castro, the communist leader of Cuba. After the disastrous Bay of Pigs invasion, the CIA, with Kennedy's approval, explored various schemes to eliminate Castro, ranging from poisoned cigars to exploding seashells. These plots, though ultimately unsuccessful, highlighted the moral complexities of the Cold War, a time when the lines between right and wrong, between legitimate action and morally questionable tactics, often became blurred. November 22, 1963, a date forever etched in the annals of history. The day America lost its 35th president, John F. Kennedy, to an assassin's bullet in Dallas, Texas. The motorcade was making its way through Dealey Plaza when the fatal shots rang out. The world stood still as the news spread like wildfire. A nation plunged into mourning, its leader struck down in broad daylight. The Warren Commission, tasked with investigating the assassination, concluded that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. Yet the shadows of doubt linger. Conspiracy theories abound, fueled by unanswered questions and inconsistencies. Was it a lone gunman? Or, as some believe, was it a more sinister plot? In the aftermath, America grappled with its grief and the loss of its youthful and charismatic leader. The images of that day, Jackie Kennedy's blood-stained suit, the swearing-in of Lyndon B. Johnson aboard Air Force One, remain seared into the collective memory. Kennedy's assassination was not just a personal tragedy, it was a national trauma. It marked the end of an era, a poignant reminder of the fragile nature of life and the volatility of the times. As we delve into the details of that fateful day, we confront the enduring mysteries that surround JFK's assassination. The truth, obscured by layers of speculation and myth, remains elusive. But what is undeniable is the profound impact of that moment on a nation, on history, and on the legacy of John F. Kennedy. The echoes of November 22, 1963 continued to reverberate, reminding us of the man who once inspired a generation to ask what you can do for your country. His life was cut short, but his influence endures. And so we remember, we question, we seek answers. For in understanding the past, we find meaning for the present and hope for the future. If you found this deep dive into JFK's legacy insightful, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Leave a comment with your thoughts and suggest new topics you'd like us to explore.